Hello and welcome. This is the I Decide for Me, Let's Talk About It parent webinar series hosted by Clarity. My name is Lori Kuykendall and I will be hosting these sessions for you. I want to start by commending you for taking an active role in parenting your adolescents, for wanting to learn more about adolescents and how to help them. Goodness knows we can all use more help in parenting our adolescents. A couple of things as we get started as I talk to parenting groups would be this. First of all, parenting is hard. Can we just go ahead and agree that parenting is not a job for sissies? It's hard every day, and I want to just sit with you in that for a moment and acknowledge that hard. A second point I'd like to make is that parenting is personal. Each of us have a unique set of children in our homes. We have different ages, different personalities, different sexes, different count of how many you have, and a different set of their strengths and weaknesses, and all that mixes together with our personalities and our ages and our experiences as their parents. And what I mean to say is that I can present some general principles to you, but in the end, it comes down to how you parent your children. What you do in your home will look different than what I've done in my home, but I hope to give you some practical tools and strategies that will help you do it a little bit better and make a bigger impact on their lives. And third, I would say that there are no perfect parents. There are no perfect parents and there's no perfect kids. We're all just doing the best that we can. There's not a one-to-one correlation between great parenting and great kids. So you can have a really great set of parents who produce really troubled, challenging, difficult children, and at the same time, difficult, dysfunctional, absent, sometimes not engaged parents can produce some amazing kids. But we want to do our best, and we want to take the information and the skills and tools that I'll be sharing with you during this series to make a difference in your home. There are no perfect parents. There are some experienced parents. I'm one of those, and as I sit here, I have 4 children who've made it to adulthood. My husband, Chris, and I have been fortunate to bring 3 daughters and 1 son up into the adult world. My favorite part about this picture I'm showing you is the absolute mayhem that happened before we got the dog still and all of us with a smile on for that split second. I'm reminded of how frustrated the photographer was, and we had already taken pictures. We were tired and hungry. We almost gave up, and then one split second, we got this really nice picture of us. And it reminds me to all of us, let's not give up. When things are about to fall apart, hang in there, push through, and we can capture these beautiful moments of raising our children. So my goal with these sessions is to empower you to guide and support your children toward optimal sexual health. Let me break that down a little bit. When I say to empower you, I mean to equip you and encourage you. I'm going to give you skills and tools and information that would equip you. But then I hope to encourage you, give you the motivation and inspiration to take those schools and that skills and information and put them into play in your world. So then I say we want to guide and support our children. Guiding would be our words, our direction, our teaching, and then supporting them is that relational connection we have with them as they navigate on up and through adulthood. And then you'll see I use this phrase, optimal sexual health. Optimal means just what it means, the best, to hope for the best sexual health, which is a part of overall health and wellness for our children. This is where we're headed, to empower you, to equip and encourage you, to guide and support your children toward optimal sexual health, and to do so more effectively, more confidently, and more courageously. The vision I have as we go through this is to protect the current and future health of our children. So children, teens especially, think for the moment. They're living for today, for their current feelings and their current experiences. We, as their mature adult parents, can also see their future, where they're headed. We want to be about the current and future health of our children. And I break down health in these 5 dimensions of physical, mental, emotional, social and relational, and spiritual. So we'll be looking through those 5 dimensions of health as they're growing up through adolescence into adulthood. We'll think about ways to protect that health. There are many threats out there across their physical, mental, emotional, relational, and spiritual health. We want to be about parents who can guide and support them and protect their current and future health. We've got 5 sessions planned for you. This first one will be what happened to my baby. We'll look at puberty and adolescence. The second one will be hang up and hang out. We will look at teens and technology and several different aspects of technology relevant to our discussion. Third, we'll look at rock the talk, as I call it, how to talk to your kids about sex, a difficult subject for many of us and yet needed for our kids to be healthy today, given all the cultural pressure there. Fourth up, we've got just right parenting, not perfect parenting, but just right parenting, some practical ways to find that balanced approach to navigating our teens who are growing in their independence. And then this last session we've set up to be a joint session between you and your child, because I care. And we'll look at how we can take these topics we've learned in the first four sessions together and put them together for ways for you to better communicate and open up discussion in your home with your child. So let's dive in. Session 1 will be what happened to my baby, navigating puberty and adolescence. I chose that word navigating, literally means by definition to travel by water across oceans and crazy waves. That sounds a lot like the journey of adolescence to me. It's getting over the storms and the crazy waves of adolescence. Navigating also means to steer through or to make one's way over or through a particular situation. Well, we need to make our way through, steer through adolescence, and I want to encourage you that there is another side to it. This next picture I have up here shows us, I took in the Mount Carmel Zion Tunnel in Zion National Park. Last year, my husband and I were there. This tunnel is 1.1 miles long. This is right at the end of it when we finally saw the light. The tunnel was built in 1930, so almost 100 years old. In the darkness of that tunnel, I was having trouble navigating and getting through and worried of what might finally be ahead. And then all of a sudden, the light appeared. I want to encourage you, there is another side to adolescence. As I've shared, I've got 4 children in adulthood now, and I'm really enjoying who they've each become. But there are many days I wasn't enjoying it. Many days it was really hard to navigate on through. So let's do that. Let's take a look at what puberty and adolescence mean. By definition, puberty is the physical changes that make a person able to reproduce. That's what it means. From becoming a child who can become an adult who can make a child is that transition of puberty. Adolescence means the physical, mental, emotional, and relational changes of a child becoming an adult. And the difference between those two terms, sort of the nuance there, is that puberty is the earliest stage of adolescence, the physical, mental, and emotional relational changes happening within them to prepare them to reproduce. Adolescence is a broader time frame from childhood all the way through adulthood, usually starting around 11 and continuing up to full maturity, which isn't until 25. We'll look at brain development and know that those brains are still developing into maturity up until the mid-20s. So puberty happens like this, right? It begins in the brain. About a year before anything changes in bodies, the brain begins to change. Hormones are special chemicals that begin to change in the brain and send signals out to the body about the changes that are to come. Puberty begins at a different time for every person. That age can be 9 to 14 with girls, 10 to 15 with guys. It's really a bell curve of how often and when puberty begins. And that time is controlled by hormones. It's nothing we control. And what's interesting about that whole process is that there's no such thing as normal. There's no normal time frame. Everybody kind of wants to know, when does it begin and how does it happen? Think about how scary this is for children, especially to have these unknown changes up ahead of them, and then to go through that time frame can last 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years to get all of these physical changes in place and the intellectual challenges and cognitive development coming on behind. There is no normal. And I want us to keep that in mind because this is a time frame of life where everybody wants to be normal. They want to fit in. And yet so much is happening around them that is not in their control. During puberty, we have changing brains and we have changing bodies. Those things are changing how we think and they're changing how we feel. They're changing how we think and feel and look. They're changing how we relate to other people as well. So let's just kind of reminisce several of these. I don't know where your children are in this development. I suspect you have some already through, some entering, some still not there, but I want to be able to put it into context for everyone that has gone through or is going through these changes. So everyone changes, meaning the boys and the girls both will have a growth spurt. It's usually the first sign that puberty's up ahead. They'll begin to shoot up on the growth chart. Their hands and their feet begin to grow bigger. Their skin changes happen. There will be increased oil production, and acne can begin to appear more than it did before. And hair changes. Hair begins to grow in some new places, and hair can become curly or more coarse than it was before. And eyes also can begin to change. These are everyone changes. They may need a new prescription for their eyes. They may need some new soap for their face and skin to help manage the oil. They may need to be reminded to take a shower more frequently than they did at one time. Those are the things everyone is going through. And then we'll split out and look at what are the males going through. Their voice is deepening, usually cracking before it deepens. Their muscles are beginning to develop, take on more form. Their shoulders are becoming more broad. Their testicles will mature and begin to produce sperm, and their genitals will grow larger as well. So walking through the male side, walking through the female side, these are things you're familiar with, but I want to remind you what it feels like from a child's perspective. Their ladies will begin to have their hips widen, their breasts or breast buds will appear and begin to develop. The ovaries mature and begin releasing eggs, the eggs that had been there from the time they were born and now begin to release as a part of ovulation, and menstruation begins for them. My point with all of this, as I mentioned earlier, this is a lot of change. And there are two things that make those changes so hard. Number one, they're not in control of them, and they're happening internally in their bodies. And to me, this requires an approach to parenting that requires a lot of compassion. This mother comforting her hurting daughter is sort of what I want to help us think through, that these changes are scary and awkward and uncomfortable. We've got to lean in at times when sometimes they're acting in ways that want to make us push out. We've got to lean and be there. We've got to listen and help understand. Goodness knows, not one of us would want to go back through and do puberty again. So let's take a compassionate approach in our parenting and help them get through it, navigating through those hard times to the other side of this. While their bodies are changing, their brains are changing, it's important to help them with some basic body care. Let's take care of this body to help it grow and function the best that it can. So first of all, we can talk about nutrition, setting some parameters and helping them make healthy decisions from all of the food groups, getting the different kinds of nutrients in there. I like to talk about with them when I'm actually reaching young people directly. I always say, whose responsibility is this? Is this yours or your parents? And helping them grow and taking responsibility for their food choices as well to get those bodies working as well as they can. They also need exercise. Of course, the medical field recommends 60 minutes of movement every day. Some of our kiddos get that easily in sports. Some of that need to get a little bit more, maybe just walking to school or riding their bike around the neighborhood. There's different ways to get that movement so those muscles and bones can continue to grow strong. And then how about the importance of sleep? This is when they begin to resist, right? They're getting older. They should want to stay up later. And yet they need 9 hours of sleep. More sleep for adolescence is needed than early childhood even, because their bodies are growing at such a rapid pace and need that recovery that happens when they're sleeping. So these are parameters we can guide and support them in taking care of their body and being healthy physically and emotionally as well. Let's talk a little bit more about changing brains. Their brains are changing at a very fast speed. And as I mentioned earlier, doesn't happen till well up in the mid-20s that full maturation is complete. So let's take a little look at the brain itself. Here's a picture of it, and we'll look at cognitive development as it's happening through these years. It is centered now in the frontal lobes of the brain. Cognitive thinking, processing, developing is in the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex of the brain. The activity that's happening there is referred to as executive function. Executive in terms of leading, deciding, being the one in charge of the rest of the brain. Scientists have discovered that cognitive maturity isn't complete until about age 25. This is such an interesting phenomenon because their bodies are complete by about 14, 15, or 16. And it won't be another 9 or 10 or 11 years later till their brain is complete. This is a challenge internally. You can understand why. And just because the cognitive maturity isn't complete until about age 25, it doesn't mean that young people can't make some good decisions. Can they make good decisions? Yes. Do they need help making better decisions? Yes, absolutely. So let's look a little bit more about what's going on in that prefrontal cortex. So these are all of the cognitive maturity pieces coming together in the brain. First is judgment. Judgment is weighing out risks and rewards, the consequences of decisions. That's not all the way in place yet. The second one, moral intelligence. Can they weigh out right and wrong and the consequences of not choosing right or wrong behaviors? Abstract thinking. I love to think about abstract thinking because we think abstractly as adults, but adolescents are still very concrete, black and white. They see things very clearly, exactly as we say them. And sometimes we've got to be careful that we don't assume they can understand what we're talking about. That's abstract thinking, not in place yet. Also not in place yet is perception and intuition. Being able to see what's not obvious. It's kind of that abstract idea again, that they haven't been able to take things farther than what they see on the surface. Of course, next is planning for the future. They're thinking for the moment, living for today, and not able to really process 5 or 10 or 15 years ahead. We've got to help do that for them. And then understanding rules for social conduct. How do we get along? And we know also that they're learning to make eye contact, learning to address adults appropriately, learning to interact with strangers. Those things are all coming into play. The last two on our list here is impulse control and emotion control. So it's interesting because the brain develops from the back to the front, and as it comes through the back of the brain, the portions of the brain that work on emotions and memory are in place before all of this cognitive control of those are in place. So with emotions, as the scientists will tell us, their emotions are fully intact. They can be angry, they can be sad, they can be frustrated, they can be happy. All of those emotions are there, but the control over them is not in place. We know that if you have teenagers in your home. You know that they can get super angry and act on that anger rather than having the control of that emotion. Or as I say to young people, when my emotions are controlling me, I'm going to get really, really angry and punch out a window. Whereas where I'm controlling my emotions, I feel that anger, and yet I say, you know what, I'm going to sit down, take a deep breath, and not let that emotion control me. So this is a lot of what's still not in place with their brains. Another big part of their adolescent brain and all of these ideas together lead them to be risk takers. They are taking more and more risks. That risk taking, that thrill seeking can be positive or it can be negative. So they like to take the risks. There's sort of this feel-good chemical, the dopamine that is released chemically in their body that says they like to reach out and try something new. However, as we said a minute ago, they're unable to weigh out the risks and rewards. Add to that when they can't control their impulses and they can't think beyond the moment, they're often able to make bigger decisions that get them into bigger consequences and can do so in a hurry. But how can risk-taking be positive? Well, it helps them step out of their comfort zone. So maybe to try out for a sports team, it can help them run for the student council or learn to drive. So risk-taking isn't all bad. They are risk-taking young people, but we've got to provide that guidance and support to help them make risks that won't lead to those longer-term harm and consequences in their lives. So think about their risk-taking. It is there, and then channel it towards positive choices that will ultimately help them move on towards their dreams and goals in the future. So let's take about how can we as their parents help them grow in these cognitive areas. We can be a positive role model. You're going to hear that again and again from me. I think it's kind of obvious, but sometimes we forget that more is caught than is taught. They're watching us. How are we controlling our emotions? How are we making decisions more logically and cognitively, thinking out those consequences and planning accordingly? We can be supportive and helping them in a right direction and providing those guardrails, as we sometimes say, to keep them moving in the right direction. We want to help guide that decision making, and there's several aspects to that. Give them the facts in concrete ways because they're still in that very concrete thinking. Help them know the facts. Tell them what you expect of them. I think it's this balance of sharing our expectations. They want to hear from us. They want those guardrails up more than they seem to think they do. We want to help them explore their options and then make a choice for themselves, suggesting the best option and let them make that decision. It's really a detailed, thoughtful decision-making process that happens in conversations with them as you face greater and greater decisions. Maybe it's what classes to take this year. Maybe it's what to do on the weekend. Maybe it's what kind of summer work you want to try to find. So thinking about their decision-making will help them grow cognitively. And then understanding that they are intelligent beings that are still developing. They need us still. They need us to be involved in helping process these things in a concrete way and growing in logic, helping them think through positives and negatives, weighing them out and making those decisions that help them. We can help them grow cognitively, but they've also got a lot of growth happening around emotions as well. So I want to talk about emotional and relational needs, and then how can we as parents meet those emotional and relational needs. So this is a simple model that I like to use to help people see through how to set up what are those needs and how can we as parents meet them. And you've probably seen similar kinds of discussions around hierarchies of needs. I say it like this. All of us have a foundation of a need for safety and security. We need to know that we are taken care of. That's food, shelter, clothing, water, and that we're protected there. We all have those needs in place. But beyond that basic need of safety and security, we have a need for love and connection, relational needs, to feel that love and acceptance from those that love us and are with us in relationship. Then ultimately, we all have a need for purpose and contribution. We want to understand, why are we here and what difference does it make? We all have these needs, and when these needs aren't met, we tend to go looking to fill them in wrong ways or their unhealthy ways, like the old song used to say, looking for love in all the wrong places. So I want to translate this back to our parent relationship with them. How can we help meet those needs at home so they're less likely to go getting those needs met somewhere outside of the home in an unhealthy way? So take safety and security. We can provide monitoring and supervision. Of course, we're there to provide their meals and help with their laundry and give them a safe place to live. But another part of that is, do we know where they are, what they're doing, and who they're with? Are we the ones driving the carpool? Those simple questions provide a level of monitoring and supervision that actually the Centers for Disease Control says is very protective for our children, to just monitor them and know where they are, those basic needs of safety and security. But then going on from there and meeting their relational needs, we can provide support and love, empathy, and compassion. Here comes our compassion word again. Are we there with that unconditional love that loves you for who you are, different than what you do or what you look like? I love to talk about parents about empathetic parenting. An empathetic parent says, I see your hurt and I want to help. We lean into that hurt like we would if someone were hurt on the side of the road. We would lean into that empathy like our children who are struggling in our own home. And then that word compassion. Do we have compassion on the challenges they're facing, or are we just frustrated with them because they're not handling those challenges the way we would or the way we would want them to? So that relational need, especially of support and love, empathy and compassion, if we can fill that up at home and in the community of people that we live with, we are less likely to go seek it outside in unhealthy ways. And then that last need, to understand their purpose and contribution. I love that we can provide opportunity and contribution to them, opportunities to serve and find out what they love to do to help other people, opportunities to make a difference in the world around them. What were they uniquely made to do to make a difference here? And that kind of contribution, it helps them understand more than just a self-esteem, but a connection with other people that meets those greatest needs for identity and purpose. So those emotional and relational needs can be our key role and a key focus, especially as they come through adolescence. And I want to look at a couple of ways we can help them grow emotionally. There's our be a positive role model again. How are we living that out in our lives? Do they see us doing things that help our balance, whether that's exercise or good rest or things that balance our emotions? We can catch them doing something good. We can give them support and encouragement, help them develop their self-esteem. They are unique people. Each one of them should be valued for what makes them unique. They are living in a time of life where they want to be like everybody else, and yet they aren't. They can't ever be like everybody else. They are unique human beings, and they each have their strengths and weaknesses, their personalities that make them them, and we need them to be them. We can show them love and affection. We can talk to them as intelligent people. I think sometimes we've got to help respect them as growing into adults, just like we would talk to the neighbors' adolescents, instead of talking to our adolescents in a way that is demeaning or disrespectful. Talk to them as intelligent people, be fair, and be an askable parent. Are you available? Can they safely bring those emotions with you? When they express those emotions to you, are you listening? Are you pausing? Or are you quick to react and quick to jump in? We want to create homes where it's safe to express those emotions, where they can share their frustrations and their excitement and happy times and their disappointments and sad times. They can be a place where you can be heard and valued and then guided and supported onto a better place. And then we talked about relationally as well. How can we help teens grow relationally? Here's be a positive role model again. Do they see us modeling friendships and in our marriage, if we have a marriage, a partner that we're married to in our homes? Do they see us with friendships? Do they see us interacting with our jobs? How do they see us acting relationally with our extended family members? We want to encourage self-confidence, set limits and expectations. What are limits and expectations that have to do with relationships? Well, maybe there are things like some curfews of when you're going to come home when you're out with friends. Maybe there are some expectations about where we're going to hang out. We want to often be at our house, so we can be monitoring what they're doing at our house rather than always out and about. Some limits and expectations about social media we'll address in our next session, but thinking through how those kinds of limits and expectations on friendships and relationships can help keep them in that safe place. And then the last one on this list is that word listen. I can remember with one of my children especially, I was just kind of in a busy season of life and she wouldn't share much very often. But every now and then she would open up her mouth and this voice inside me would say, listen, she's talking. And I would have to practically, restrain myself from doing anything else but pausing and just listen to her. When their mouths are opening and they're sharing things from their hearts and their minds, to listen. And listen without preparing your response is a whole other session on listening skills. But if we can listen in a way that allows them to fully express, and then we can pause and respond in a way with compassion, helping to guide and support them going forward. I want to give you a model for parenting, what I call scaffolding. So a scaffold is literally a temporary supporting framework. We've been talking about guiding and supporting. If you think about a scaffolding that's put up on a building as they're raising up a high skyscraper like the one in the picture, you will see that we want to help them grow from within. They're building up themselves, and yet we've got just enough support there to keep them relatively safe from themselves and from the dangers, the threats to their health from the world around them. You may have heard an emphasis recently on the youth voice. We've got to let the youth speak. And while I appreciate that, I want to show you a little bit of balance here and help us see that they still need us. They still need us in this role as they're growing in independence. We will eventually take that scaffolding down and they will be on their own into adulthood. I'll show you an example of what I mean by this youth voice idea. So an organization called Advocates for Youth, who is about young people that are powerful and they're taking over. You can see in their subtitle there, but they've said it's time to let the young people lead. And while I absolutely value the voice of young people and they should be heard and a part of our work at all times, they're still developing. They still don't have all of the answers. They still don't have all the cognitive maturity. They still need us. They still need our parents. They still need us, and we still need them. We're going to be picking up more about balanced parenting in a future session, but I just want to kind of give these pictures as a vision of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to give the research base of family connection, parent connection, which shows us that they are best protected when we are most connected in our homes. So what's happening to our babies? They're becoming those independent adults, those birdies that will eventually stretch their wings and fly away. We can figure out, we can navigate through this time of puberty and adolescence and try to help them become the fullest of who they were made to be in that context of love and relationship and compassion and support. And they will need to know also that we are always here for them, that they are always safest and most accepted in our home. The world is a scary world out there. I want us to continually elevate even when we're tired, even when we don't have the time or the energy to continue to invest in our children. You'll hear me say in this session and in our following sessions as well that they are worth it, they need us. They are not ready to lead themselves yet. They are still within our care, and it is our role to help protect them and lead them on towards the healthy future, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. In each of our sessions, I'll be giving you some homework, and I hope you consider a couple of these questions. First of all, have you talked with your child about their growth and development? Wherever they are in this process, even if they're all the way through the physical changes, have you talked about the cognitive piece? Help them understand that their brain is still developing. They can have an awareness that this brain is not all the way at its fullest capacity yet, that I've got to still look to the adults around me who need and look to them who can help me as I need their direction going forward. And then have you affirmed your child once each day for who they are more than for what they do? Be intentional. Think of that one time each day to affirm them for who they are. That's different than what they do. It's different than what they look like. It's affirming who they are as a person and your value, their value to your family and their value to you, that they mean something just how they are, and created that sense of guidance and support and compassionate acceptance in your home. So what's happening to my baby? I would tell you that one of the things we often want to do is hold on to those babies and keep them in close, but we can step back and know that ultimately that's not for their best. For their best is to help them grow and grow into independence. They will eventually fly away, and we will learn to go on with our lives as well as the adults who've poured into them for their time in our home and then set them free to go off into the world and do the very best they can. So this concludes our first session. We will pick up next time with Hang Up and Hang Out, and we'll talk into teens and technology. Thank you for being with us today.